Let's just get right into it. Hey, Disgruntled. This is a new guest. He's never been on this podcast before,
Never ever.
why don't you guys give him a bunch of likes? No, I'm just joking, but so he was the host of the League of the Wings with me, but now I'm interviewing him as a guest on a more personal level. But we will still talk about sports a little bit towards the end of it.
Yeah.
So do you want to introduce yourself and plug anything?
All right. Well, my name is Titus Oldham. I am a sophomore film and media arts major here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm also pursuing a certificate in music technology. Shout out to that. We'll see how that goes. I'm from Cairo, Egypt. Before that, I was born and kind of raised in Decatur, Alabama, which you may have never heard of, and that's fair. It's kind of a small town, but, you know, good vibes. Besides that, I have been working on some projects, definitely. I've got some more personal project stuff, like my own portfolio where I do like some design work and some writing, poetry. If you go to my Instagram at Kid from Cairo or my Twitter at Titus, there's always a link to a Visco I have where I upload all my design stuff, and I'm always willing to design anything for anyone at any time. So if you ever need anything like that, you can go check out my portfolio and then message me. My DMs are always open to anyone, and then we can talk out a price or whatever. I also am a co-host on a podcast that is about to relaunch called Tunes for Two. We do some music commentary. It's been a great hit. We've done 20 episodes so far. One of them was just an interlude, I guess, but regardless, I think it's pretty impressive to have gone that far, especially since we started in freshman year and, you know, we're still adapting to our new surroundings. Caleb's been on it as well, so,
Yep.
you know, of course I have to return the favor and be on this show. And then also starting a new project that we're going to get into called Babellion Studios. A previous guest on your show, Joshua Frier. We're co-founders of that, and basically we're trying to make a multimedia company / empire where we all just band together for one common cause, make some films, make some music, make some more podcasts, make a bunch of shit, and then also continue all the other projects we're already doing like this, and just further collaborate and support each other through one common brand. So, yeah.
So very exciting new project starting. Let's kind of elaborate on the Babellion Studios. So how was it created? Or like what are the origins of it?
Origin story of Babellion Studios actually goes all the way back to freshman year. Sophia and I, the Tunes for Two podcast hosts, I think I was literally just on a road trip down to Alabama for Christmas, and we were just talking for hours, and I just told her, I was like, you know, I've never been the type of person who just wanted to stick to one form of media when I'm talking about like my creative endeavors or anything like that. I've always been the type of person who just wants to branch out and do as many things as possible, just be kind of like a jack of all trades, and be really nice if, like, since we all are talented individuals within our friend group, if we could all just like make a brand where we can all like help support each other in any of our endeavors, because like there's always this like issue where if someone has their own creative pursuit with someone else in a friend group, then someone else feels left out or whatever, and it's just like, well, if we're all a part of this one united brand, then no one's ever going to feel left out, because even if they're not in one episode or one particular maybe short film, like they know that they're still part of that brand and what we're all trying to build collectively. And so that's basically what I was trying to tell her all the way back then. And it would just be cool to just like, you know, get merch for it and shit like that. It's just like you know, just to visualize ourselves as like making a company. I think that's just like kind of a flex, honestly. But organizationally, it would all help our creative pursuits since we're already collaborating with each other on so much shit. And so a lot of time went by since then. I brought it up with various people ever since then. And eventually I got back to Josh one semester. I think it had to have been like last semester. So let's say around October, November. We just started talking about like, actually, honestly, it was probably later than that. So let's say November, December. of 2020. The worst year on record is finally ending.
You can say that again.
We're just like kind of visualizing where we go from there, because we don't want our like motivation to run dry like it did during 2020, as everyone's did during 2020. And so me and him were just talking a lot about it was just about us having some creative pursuits. Like he would be like, within a short film setting, it would be like he would be the director, I'd be the producer, and we'd have like a relationship there. And then within music, we wanted to make music too, and we worked out a system there, and even started like getting ourselves ready to like start making an album, until we got to the point where I was like, shit, we don't even know that much about music. Like maybe we should slow down on that pursuit. But that's still something in the long run we'd like to do. But eventually he started thinking about the multimedia company thing that I had brainstormed way back when, and he was like, yo, I think we are all just in the need of some motivation booster, like some common cause all band together for, so that we can start being productive again. Why the fuck not? Because we're already making all these short films for all these classes. We have enough experience doing those things, and we already have enough experience collaborating with each other. Why aren't we just doing this already while we, since most of us are roommates, like we're always just, talking together all the time, just collaborating in our own ways. It's just like, let's just do something with this. We have all the resources we need, really. We need to do something with this. Let's not waste our time. So that was kind of the sentiment behind why we started doing that. Now we took a while to really brainstorm what we felt like the company's foundation would be. Like, what is our mission statement? Like, what do we believe in as a company? And then we went even deeper than that. Like, what are our long-term goals? What are our short-term goals? Like, we just did a lot of organizational thinking before we even presented it to you. And when Josh presented it to you, in my mind, I was like, this is beginning. Like, we're out of the brainstorming part of it, like the actual company aspect, and we're finally into the aspect or the phase where this is being realized. And so after that, we made some brand identities. I made logos, and we're in the midst of making a website. Follow us on Instagram at Babellion Studios. That's basically the only place you can find us at this point. But in the future, we're hoping to branch out, obviously. So.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because it's like actually going into like tuition or whatever. And usually when I start these kind of projects or hear about these kind of projects, or at least throughout high school and even up until you presented the idea, they always kind of like fizzled out, and some of those ideas could have been great, I feel like, or if either like me or like the other person that I was working with on that particular project, or if we actually pursued it and not just like got out of the brainstorming idea, then I feel like it could have been great. But I'm like so excited for this because it's like we have the name, we have the logo, we have like all of these like certain aspects in place that like I'm just so excited about, and it's like actually like
we just need actual content to distribute at this point. I mean, obviously Tunes for Two started making videos again, and you're continually making vlogs. Like, you're probably production wise, you have the most content coming out at the fastest rate, I guess. So obviously we have things like that, like partnered projects is what I've decided to call them. I don't really know exactly what like the official term would be for like Tunes for Two, Trace Gates, and Disgruntled, but obviously we're doing these things all the time, and that's content to distribute. But the real content we want to distribute that is going to be the biggest deal is the stuff we do all together as our own massive projects that like has no specific like, oh, does this belong to Tunes for Two? Oh, does this belong to Disgruntled? It's just like, this is a Babellion project. And so once we get that to distribute, that's when I think that's like when it becomes even realer. Like, obviously it's already kind of realized, but it becomes even realer once we finally have that project out, which we're in the midst of actually trying to get out there. So
I guess to further this conversation is like, who's all a part of it?
Yeah, so I've already kind of mentioned a lot of the cogs in the machine, but basically Josh and I are the co-founders. Josh plays a more creative role in the organizational structure. Like, he controls a lot of the creative aspects of like what type of content we're going to produce, basically, because that it is mostly his vision. I mean, like, I thought about this a long time ago, but as of more recently, like, the actual, like, I don't know, the flavor that comes in with the studio, like, he developed. So yeah, he definitely is like the pride of this whole operation, whereas like I'm kind of like the guy who is the executive producer or whatever, who just makes sure that anything that Josh wants to get done gets done in a timely fashion and a realistic fashion. Like, anytime I have to be like, yo, Josh, this is not something we're able to do. There's no way we can fucking ride elephants throughout the Broad Street or something like that for your fucking short film. Like, get over yourself. And then he'd have to be like, okay. But if there was ever at any point where I felt like, something he had envisioned was just so great that like I would do anything just to figure out, then like I'm the guy who like takes his imagination to the next step and makes it a reality. So that's basically like how we work as a duo at the top of like this. I don't want to even call it a hierarchy because we're pretty much a democratic like group. Most of the things that happen here do come from our own minds, get distributed amongst you guys. So we try to keep it as democratic as possible, but like Josh and I, we just it just so happens that we're always thinking about this. Like, we can't stop. We're just so dedicated to this. So that's just the way it works. And then there's you, of course, and we have no like real roles established yet. It's kind of like a project by project basis, so we just call you guys like key creatives. But in general, there's like a pretty clear idea of what your specialties are and like how you'll be involved with all of our like grand projects, like together projects in the future. And like you would definitely be like an editor, and you signed yourself up as part of the marketing team as well. And so there's Trey from Trey Skates, shout outs. He also is like chief of cinematography, and this doesn't just mean that he's always the cinematographer. It also means like he can help us get like the right cinematographers for the right project. So that's a pretty like key distinguishment right there. There's Sophia from Tunes for Two, who is a big writer, and obviously she just really helps a lot, like making sure that there's like some actual substance to what we're writing, because it's very easy, like we're kind of writing a comedy and whatever, like it's very easy to just like write a comedy that just makes people laugh and just like has no like ulterior motive. Basically it's very easy to just develop something like that. She kind of ensures that we have the means to make people laugh but also make people think, and that sounds so cheesy, but like it's true. Like, she definitely does like provide a very like personal, passionate level to what we're writing that makes like I feel like will make our projects very different. And obviously Josh's, I feel like, directorial style also helps with that as well. So yeah, they definitely, as writer director duo, like work together very well in that aspect. And then there's Brendan, also another roommate here at the Young Bull house. He is the only, no, he's not the only, but all the people I just mentioned are film and media arts majors. He actually just changed his major from something in computer science to media production. He's still trying to find his way as a key creative into like what he thinks he's good at, what he wants to pursue further. But I felt through what I've seen him do with his own life basically and his own personal projects that he'd be really good at managing like social media and like doing marketing and stuff like that, just really getting the audience engaged in a day-by-day basis. And so that's kind of what I put him in charge of as of right now. Obviously I think there's more production wise things like on the actual set that I think he could find himself doing pretty well as well, but we'll see. And then there's Gladia Bolt, who as of right now I think she could actually have like a lot more like a lot more roles than what I'm about to say here, because I think she is in general just like one of the most creative people I've ever met, and she could easily write, and honestly I don't think she'd ever want to try it just because she is an actor first, but I feel like she could easily direct as well. She will be our casting director as of right now, just because she does have the most connections with actors and other people like that. Also she's the only person like who has actually like lived in Philadelphia the longest, so she has connections from around here as well. It's just like we needed someone on the inside or whatever. Since like we're all this is a Philadelphia based company because that's why we're all here, but at the same time none of us are actually from Philadelphia except for her, so it's very helpful to have her a part of this. Those are the key 7 right now. I also want to give a honorable mention shout out to my friend Gray, who said that he would make our website, and he wanted his name associated with this, so he's, obviously I have to mention him here, and I feel like he'd want to be even more involved going forward, but that's yet to be like fully worked out. Shout out to Gray Lewis.
Sounds good. And then there's also going to be like more additions as well in the later years and stuff, but that's like the core 7 or 8 people, like you just said, within the group. I guess let's wrap this up. You already basically explained most of kind of what Babellion is, but if you had to choose like 1 to 2 sentences or a couple sentences to kind of leave the viewers with like one like defining thing about Babellion.
Man, I'm bad at this. Josh is way better at really defining what Babellion is, and at least to summarize, because I've actually had to do like the Instagram bio for this, and I just wrote something so bland, but I'll try to get Josh to add more flavor to it. But if it's up to me, I would say we are a group of young creatives who just want to do as much with their young, creative, inspirational, imaginative passion as they ever could fucking imagine. They just want to do as much as possible. And instead of being selfish, stuck-up creatives like most film and media arts students are, we've decided to really band together for one common cause. So,
awesome.
I don't know if like that was more than how many sentences you told me, but
that's beautifully put. I love it. All right, now let's transition into your personal life and kind of where you grew up, and
let's go.
So let's start with Egypt. What was it like living in Egypt since middle school?
Oof. Yeah, I usually tell people since middle school because that is kind of true, but I did move at the last half of my 5th grade, which I never talk about because I also went to a different school for that last half of 5th grade than I did for like 6th grade through 12th grade. A lot of my like initial impact of like, oh my god, I'm in Egypt was from that school, so I felt like that was worth mentioning. So Egypt, when I first got there, I didn't even know what to think. I just feel like I was in so much shock that I just kind of didn't even bother to really embrace the difference of it, because I'm from small town Alabama. That's all I ever knew before I moved to Egypt. And before that, I had been to Canada briefly and England briefly. And when you think of those 3 countries, like obviously international, but not the most diverse. When you think of the spectrum of international, they're all just English-speaking, majority white people countries. So going to Egypt, I was just like in so much shock that I didn't even like think about like, oh, this is so different or anything like that. I just kind of like kept to myself mostly. But at the same time, like my parents did a great job at like trying to get me accustomed to all like the culture and stuff like that. But I did a terrible job at trying to learn Arabic, which I regret. I still barely know any Arabic, mainly because a lot of people don't know this shit, but Egypt is a very developed country. People don't give it enough credit, especially when they go there and just see like trash out on the streets. But you have to understand, like, Cairo is also a city, and that just happens. I think a lot of the issue with why people still look to Egypt as being kind of like this, I don't know, stuck in its old ways sort of country is because of Western influence and like Arab influence coming into Egypt and just like rewriting its history, rewriting its whole culture. Like there have been many points in history where people have come in and basically tried to tell Egypt, or just this is kind of Africa and Middle East in general, like you are going to follow our ways, we own you because of like white, supremacy or whatever. Ever since then, it's just like everyone in Egypt is like, well, fuck that, never gonna go through that again. So basically they're trying to hold on to all of their customs that they know of, like so close to their heart, even if they're shitty. So like culturally and religiously, because Islam is like 90% of the belief in Egypt. Homosexuality is like not good. Not considered to be great over there. Obviously there's a lot of homophobia and like laws that dictate that you can't express any sort of feeling of homosexuality. So yeah, even like the bad shit that like a lot of Western cultures like, oh, they're stuck in their old ways. It's just like, well, it's because people try to fuck their shit up. People try to come in and tell them how to, you know, control their lives. So they look to you and be like, let's try to be basically as different as them as possible. Because they're trying to tell us what to do, but we want to be ourselves. So that's basically how I describe Middle East in general, actually. This is the thing about Egypt, though, is that the youth and the tourism there is so dominant in the culture. And when the youth look to the Western influence, they embrace it. And so you see blue jeans on everyone in Egypt. And all that shit. And you see, because of tourism, there's a lot of like Western restaurants and just like corporations that have found its way into Egypt, because that helps tourists become like, you know, accustomed to their surroundings. Like, oh man, I don't know what to eat here. It's like, oh, I see McDonald's. That's easy, you know? And so when Western influence kind of starts piling on into Egypt, like obviously there's a lot of retaliation from like the older generations who are used to Western influence coming in and fucking shit up. But there's also a lot of welcoming from the younger generations that are just like, yeah, we can basically vibe with all this, you know. I like Friends. I like watching Phoebe and Friends, you know, like shit like that. And so it's a very much a weird relationship between the older and younger generation as far as like, what do we accept and how much of our own culture do we keep. And from a lot of the Middle Eastern and especially the Egyptian friends I've met, they've always dealt with this sort of struggle of what do I accept as like my moral code and as my reality, because obviously I need to have pride in where I come from and what my parents are teaching me, but at the same time there's this whole other world out there that we're kind of not shunning necessarily, but trying to say that like we aren't welcome there, you know, because of racism in general and stuff like that. And so the reason why I'm saying all of this is because when I get there, it's just like I see how different it is, because there's so much about Egypt that is trying to be different, but at the same time it's also so familiar, because there's McDonald's and because the younger generation is trying to welcome in all these Western influences, and because of tourism, everyone and their children and just like anyone there can speak English to you, and they want to continue to learn English because they want to welcome you there, because tourism is the main thing in Egypt. As soon as tourism goes down to Egypt, everyone fails. Everyone is like, the economy is not going to do well, basically. And so it's so familiar because people want you to feel like it's familiar. People want to welcome you as they're a very welcoming culture in general, but also because of tourism, like, you know, tell your friends that my shop is here. You know, I gave you a good price, so come tell your friends that this is here, shit like that. Because that's the whole culture and economy of Egypt. And so that's why I've always struggled. Like, I know I had to have had culture shock, but why doesn't it feel so prevalent? Yeah. You know? And so I just feel like I was able to transition very well because of how much there was that I could get my bearings on so early. Like, oh, everyone knows Egypt? Well, great. That's the easy way out for me. I don't have to learn too much Arabic. And then, oh my God, I can literally order McDonald's in like 5 minutes. Dope. I'm going to do that. So that's basically how I'd explain the whole like Egyptian culture from the point of view of someone who's coming from a Western culture. Egyptian culture from the eyes of someone from Western background. That is how I explain it.
So what was it like growing up like throughout school in Egypt? Like as you got older and actually like I don't know, I guess appreciate not even appreciate, but just like I guess self-aware of Egypt. Like how was it like
Oh
growing
no,
up?
you can say appreciated
Yeah.
because I will definitely say that I didn't appreciate Egypt that much.
Mm.
When I and this is an argument I've had with friends many times. When I got to my new school, I just felt like this is the community that I really belong to, and all of a sudden my whole like idea of what Egypt was in my mind, or like my reality or a sense of belonging, just all of a sudden became attributed to the school for like the first couple of years I was there. So like sixth to seventh grade when I still didn't know any better. And so I kind of neglected like what Egypt actually was, and instead just gave it like some sort of narrative like this school is what Egypt is to me. You know, this community that has welcomed me, because it was a welcoming community, or it appears to be one. And so any other aspect of Egypt I kind of neglected for a good amount up until like high school, and then I started embracing that more and realizing like there's so much to Egypt in this school, but a lot of people that come to this school, because it is a very community type vibe, a lot of people that come to the school just kind of attribute their whole Egyptian experience to being at this school.
Yeah.
And then whenever, because there's a lot of Egyptians at the school that stay there through long term, like kindergarten through 12th grade, whenever they hear anyone even bashing CAC, which is my school, they get to thinking like, oh, they're bashing CAC, they're bashing Egypt in general. Because the school has such a good, like, they do such a good job at like making you feel like this is where you belong and this is where you're at, whereas like there's so much outside of those walls. It's a walled campus. So I would say they do a good job at keeping you closed-minded to that fact. Even though they are a very diverse school, I definitely don't regret going there, because being exposed to that much diversity, and they're a successful school in terms of like, you know, I probably could have gone to university without them, but it definitely does help that since I had such a big slump at one point in high school, they were able to get me back on my feet. And just to be able to say I'm from an international school helps on my resume or like my college application. So
Yeah.
So are you just asking like what I thought about Egypt later in life, or what?
I mean, I guess like kind of your experience growing up more so in Egypt, like throughout like school and then other experiences as well.
Okay, the hard part about this is I've had a conversation with someone about this where I was like, I don't even feel like I'm living in Egypt, and then they're like, what neighborhood do you live in? And it was like Mahdi, which is the neighborhood I live in and most internationals live in. And he's like, oh yeah, that's not Egypt. And it's because there are so many internationals there, and like the foreign industries kind of piled on into there to like support how much international life lives there, basically. It's like, and there's even like fake plants there.
Oh really?
Like,
what?
Because there's a lot of embassies there, the embassies will just like plant through that neighborhood like trees or certain type of flowers that are from their own home country, to make them feel more familiar with their surroundings. And so there are certain areas in Mahdi where like you'll look at a tree and it's like, this is not from Egypt, you know? And it's just a very odd thing to be around. It's just like its own little bubble. And so I wish I was able to be at least for a year or so, like to be immersed in a neighborhood that wasn't so not Egypt.
Yeah.
I wish I was in a neighborhood that was more Egypt, but at the same time I was on the outskirts of Mahdi. I'm what is referred to as the other side of the tracks. So there's the Nile, and then there's kind of the skinny area of I guess it's eastern Cairo that is in between the Nile and the metro rail tracks, I guess. And I was kind of like in the middle of that. And then everyone else that I knew was basically on the other side of the tracks, where like my school was, where Katamea Heights was, which is like this really rich gated community basically for more international people, but also a lot of Egyptians lived there, I remember. It was very interesting because like I obviously went to school like basically every day, so I was always getting myself immersed in that bubble. But at the same time, I was still on the outskirts, so if I like walked around anywhere else, like I could still feel like, oh, this is like Egypt, this is Cairo. So very interesting like setting I was in, and I walked to school and back every day, which one way was like 20 to 25 minutes.
Dang.
And so I feel like I was always able, and I don't think a lot of people could say this for themselves, especially if you were a woman in Egypt, you're not really walking around much, sadly. And that's kind of the same for any society, honestly. But I was able to always just kind of be out and about. In Egypt, I walked everywhere. I occasionally took Uber. And it was just kind of nice to always have a, like, environment that was, like, comfortable with, because it suited my Western background. And it was also, like, a very green and nice area of Cairo as well, because of all the new plants that are getting in there. And then also it was just, like, it fit that Egyptian inside of me that was growing, that I didn't even realize was growing. Is like, this Egyptian pride in me is like, this is Egypt. This is beautiful. And so I feel like me more so than a lot of people just started to get this real sense of what Egyptian pride was. Like, obviously, I'm not going to claim it more than any other Egyptian, because like obviously they're Egyptian, so they deserve it more than me. But also, I mean, I lived there for more than 7 years, and I wasn't necessarily fully immersed in that sort of bubble that Mahdi was as much as everyone else was. My dad worked at a church that was on the other side of the Nile River. I would always like go with him, and I was always active within the community over there and within like even outside of Cairo. So like if it wasn't for my parents, I feel like I would have been another stuck up foreigner international kid that was in his own little bubble, whereas like they don't even know what Egypt really is. So I feel like more so than anyone else around me, I was able to really familiarize myself with like what Egypt really was, but at the same time I was still, because I had to go to that school, I was still stuck in the walls or in the bubble a lot. So I mean, I'm being very wordy with this only because I'm kind of thinking of this as I go. I didn't have answers prepared beforehand, but
you did a very good job. I just always, every time you like speak of Egypt, I'm just always fascinated because it is a different country, and it's kind of interesting to hear how like quote unquote Western Egypt is. I'm just always fascinated by the ins and outs of it.
Yeah, I lived like next door neighbors to an embassy actually.
Oh really?
It was like, man, I wish I knew it could have been like Sierra Leone. It was like just some African country you would never even think about, but like that's basically kind of like the neighborhood or like the bubble that we lived in. It was like a lot of embassies. I was actually very close to an Israeli embassy as well, which was always like super guarded because it's an Israeli embassy in Egypt. So anyways,
How many embassies were there? Do you know off the top of your head? Or
in that neighborhood? No, I don't know how many, but like there are a lot of embassies in Egypt. The American one was kind of far from us. Italian embassy wasn't that far. I mean, honestly, some of the embassies, if they're from small countries, they would be as small as a villa or a house. So it's kind of hard to tell until you realize like, this place seems more guarded than like you'd expect from a normal house. So.
What is your favorite memory from Egypt?
Oof, that's hard. I really don't know. It's like,
or I guess name one of your like favorite.
That would be more helpful, but like at the same time I don't think I could ever like look back on those times and think of like my absolute favorite, because there's just like there has to be so many subcategories for it, because like there's favorites for certain times in my life, because I think I lived there long enough where I like really feel like I changed a lot. Like there were different evolutions of myself, whereas it's like, oh, the favorite moment of my life for this version of Titus, like I definitely know what that is. But, overall, it's just like, whoa, it's like, I don't even know. One of my favorite moments, though, that I ever had was just super Egypt and was just like a very surreal experience, I guess, was one time I was just walking through the non-Mahdi part, like because I lived on the outskirts. If I walked just not even that far, a different direction, not into the bubble but outwards, I would find myself in a very immersive Egyptian environment that, if you know anything about Cairo, it's very crowded and loud, always something going on, and people are always just having their own hustle and bustle, but at the same time, like, very friendly people as well. It's not like you're in New York or anything. So I just, like, decided I would just walk that way. Like, I have no reason to go this way, but I'll just walk. And I was just listening to music, walking, and this kid ran up to me and just told me I looked like Harry Potter.
What?
And then asked me for my name, and I was like, Titus. He's like, no, you're Harry Potter, and then ran away.
That's
like,
so funny.
I just felt like that was a very interesting moment from there. That kind of relates to what I was saying about the younger generation, really accepting like Western media, especially how welcoming and like, I don't know, exuberant the Egyptians are when it comes to like foreigners coming into their territory. They're not super territorial. When it comes to their own culture and like their customs, they will be territorial about it. It's like, hey, don't, you know, like diss our own culture or whatever like that. But if you're really coming in and trying to embrace what's going on there, they will be super welcoming. They're not going to gatekeep you or anything like that. And that is established from a young age. Like, this is a kid in Egypt that knows about Harry Potter and is going up to random strangers, just asking them for their names and welcoming them to Egypt everywhere you go. Like, I lived in Egypt for 7 years. I'm walking in my own neighborhood as I do every day. And then there's always going to be someone who's just like, welcome to Egypt. And I'm like, like, it's crazy. It's just the Egyptian hospitality is unmatched, and it's also very nice to have that because I come from the South, where obviously the phrase Southern hospitality is like, you know, that's a big thing too. Like, hospitality in general is something that I definitely adore out of various cultures, and I just love how that's kind of established from a young age, especially for that kid.
I like hearing how friendly Egypt is, because it puts like humanity back in the earth, because like I feel like
no one humanizes the Middle East in general. It's really fucking annoying, but
well, I mean, from that aspect too, but then also like America, I just feel like everyone's dicks here, and it's just like,
of course,
no one's like
racist,
friendly.
People haven't gone over 9/11, despite you know them doing enough damage back. So whatever. I'm not gonna get too political into that.
But I don't know. I just feel like there's like somewhat like faith in humanity after that, or after hearing that. I mean, like, it's not like I'm like, oh, everyone like outside of the U.S. is like dicks. I'm just coming from the America aspect, where like no one in America itself is like friendly or as friendly as like everyone else, because like I just feel like no one's like walking down the street and like waving, hey, how are you doing?
Oh, they'll do that in Alabama too. I mean, especially in like grocery stores, like anyone will say hi to anyone in a fucking Alabama, which like always used to annoy me, but now that it's like, oh, this kind of reminds me of Egypt. So because I'm not like, when I'm out and about, usually I'm never talking to anyone. I have no reason to, but because of Egypt, because of Alabama, I've kind of come to the conclusion that like, it's kind of fun as long as it's like appropriate. Like there can be some creepy people who mean well, but like it comes off creepily if they try to do that. So.
What is your craziest experience from Egypt?
Man, craziest? There's so many crazy experiences where I would have to like think back and be like, I can't believe that this is my high school life. Like, as I just think back to like where all my neighborhood friends were probably at in high school. Like, they were just attending high school football games or whatever. I don't know what they're doing. I didn't stay in good contact with any friends from Alabama. I think this is kind of the typical one, but one of my favorite moments is going to a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert, and this is the first of its kind because they performed right outside of the Pyramids of Giza. One of the, you know, world wonders. It's fucking crazy because security made sure that like this shit would not go wrong. So basically you had to drive in to basically into the desert, park, get on a bus that drives you outside of the venue. And then you have to go through security, and then you can go and find your wherever you're sitting for the concert. It was like, that was also like one hell of a journey. Just like, you know, it was fun, but I went with like a bunch of friends. That was just such a funny experience. Like, this is the most Egyptian thing ever. Just like trying to make sure that this shit does not go wrong because you know, if anything happened to a foreign band in Egypt, you know that's going to be all over the news. And then Egypt does not want that. So they just want to make sure this was a success. So we got there super early, so we could literally just go right up to the stage. We were right up to the stage, basically. And we were there for hours as people piled in and were like pushing us around because they also want to get to the front and whatever. But we were a big enough group where we'd be like, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
Not all of us ended up at the very front to start the concert, but people managed to make their way up throughout the concert. And that was just such a surreal experience. Like, I see the pyramids.
Yeah.
From a very high building, basically around where I used to live. Like, my own building personally wasn't high enough, but like if I went next door to a really tall building, I could go to the top of that and be like, oh, there's the pyramids.
Dang,
and it's something crazy. I never even like, it's something I took for granted, because once you live there so long and you pass by it enough times, it's just like, yeah, I'm over it a little, which like I regret saying, because everyone's like, oh, you fucking stuck up person. But it's true, like anyone anywhere will feel that way with their own, like, I don't know, landmark in their neighborhood. But when I was there and just like seeing the drummer, I forget his name, but the drummer of Red Hot Chili Peppers just would stop playing his own songs and just turn around and look at the pyramids. I was like, that's just such a
so cool
experience, man. Just to have like this band come and really embrace the culture and just want to be able to perform for Cairo and in front of the pyramids, which is like something like, what other band can say that? Not many. Yeah, I always shout them out, because like there's a lot of bands that won't even think twice just to feel like, oh, is that safe, you know? Something like that. I appreciate that from them. And just being there, it was just a very surreal experience to be able to be a part of what was essentially a history in the making sort of event. So
yeah, I remember you telling me that you used to travel throughout high school, especially during the summers, and between grades and stuff. What was it like traveling all the time throughout high school?
Man, it wasn't even just through high school. It was, as soon as we got to Egypt, that was kind of the expectation. We would have to move a lot. There's one of the revolutions that happened maybe like after 6th grade, maybe end of 6th grade, where I actually stayed throughout that revolution for some time, just because I lived in that sort of neighborhood where like nothing was going to happen. Like out in America, if you're listening to the news, it's like, oh my god, like everyone's dying, shit like that. Like they just fucking demonize the whole situation. But like I'm just there, and literally like what you would refer to as the bad guys or whatever are parading down my street, handing out candy to kids.
Oh, that's so cool.
The Muslim Brotherhood. Obviously, I'm not going to humanize them or anything, because like they also did a lot of shitty things. But at the same time, even like anyone on either side of this revolution were like, you know, it's just like, how would you think a revolution would go down here? It's just like people aren't literally slaughtering each other out on the streets or anything like that. It's ridiculous. Like basically there's some rioting, maybe a little bit of looting, in the same way that it would be here during like the Black Lives Matter whole situation that occurred this past year, and it's still occurring, obviously. But I mean, that's kind of the same way the Muslim Brotherhood retaliated, but it happened to be at like churches or something, which here in America we hear that and it's like, oh my god, they hate Christians, like Christians can't go to Egypt, and it's like, that's not true. People that weren't in that political affiliation were trying to protect the Christians and the churches, even if they weren't themselves Christian. It's just like, it was a political thing. It was not a religious thing at all. It was a very much political thing. And so during that revolution, anyways, that was kind of off track, but that was just a really interesting time. A church paid for us to leave because they're like, oh my god, this family's stuck there, we have to get them out, basically. I don't know. And so we had some friends in Germany, we went there. And that was like one of the first times I had left Egypt since moving there. Was it my first time in Germany? I think it may have been my first time in Germany, but I've been in Germany many times ever since. And then my dad was also just like, because this is basically why we're there. My dad had a job where he had to travel a lot, connect certain churches to each other within the region, Europe and Middle East. And so he was like, yeah, I have to go to Hungary. And they gave me a 2-bedroom hotel. Titus, you want to come? And I was like, yeah. I was like, obviously, I want to fucking go. So we went to Hungary in the same summer. Went to Budapest, amazing city, and then we went back to Germany, and then we went back to Egypt, and then that was just like our summer.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout even my school years, like my dad would basically like, we had like an order. Like first was my sister who was able to go on a trip, and then it was me to Budapest. And my brother got to go to Lebanon the next time. And then, you know, one by one, we would take turns going on with our parents to these trips internationally. And then there were at points where we would all go together as a family because, like, there was this, I don't know, like, family retreat out in Lebanon or something like that. I don't know. Like, there are always reasons or events that my parents were being paid by the organization to go do these things. And so, like, when I tell people I, like, have been to all these countries, the first assumption they have is that we're rich or something. Not true. But but at the same time, I can't deny, like, we were blessed to have those opportunities, definitely. And I definitely took it for granted, because if you're a kid going through that, like, you don't really feel it as much, because, like, you're still very able to kind of, I don't know, normalize the situation, because you're so young. You don't really know what's normal yet, you know. And so you kids are more able to adapt to the surroundings easier. Same reason why they're able to learn languages easier is because they don't really know, like, what is the most comfortable language for them. It's like, we're so comfortable with English now after using it for so long, it's hard to transfer to a different language. But for kids, it's just like, fuck it, I can learn a new language. And so that's kind of how I referred to, like, just being able to travel all these places. I just kind of normalized that. I didn't really appreciate it like I should have. It just like made it seem normal, especially because, like, all my friends at my school also were kind of going through the same thing, but a lot of them were actually rich. And some of them also just had moved around a lot as well. So that's kind of how I'd refer to that. But also, as much as that was great and I really did enjoy it, even if I did kind of take it for granted, it had a downside as well, because I never really felt like I never really felt like I could get my bearings into one environment necessarily. Because, you know, obviously Egypt I refer to as like a home, but my environment was always changing around me, and I was always going different places. If I ever wanted to see family, I had to go all the way to America. And then like all of a sudden it's just like, it was culture shock going back to America for the first time. I feel like I felt the culture shock going back to America more heavily than I did when I first went to Egypt.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Because it's like, this is an area that I feel like should be familiar to me, because I'm just like walking through my old neighborhood. But at the same time, it's like, I know how much I've grown, and I know how much like I've learned since leaving this area, and how much like I disagree with like certain, like, I don't know, standards societal wise. It's just like everything had changed in my life, and now I'm walking through what is supposed to be a familiar area, and all of a sudden it just feels so different, and it's like culture shock. Like, I'm not used to America anymore, and that was like that fucked me up too. Where do I even belong? But throughout the summers, we had to travel a lot to raise the money to be able to live in Egypt, and also to have that travel budget so my dad could basically do his job. My summers were never really a break. It was like it was like an internship where I don't get any life, like, career experience or anything. I'm just along for the ride for, you know, to be able to go to school and all that. Obviously, I'm not going to discount, like, this also benefited me, obviously. But, like, at the same time, it was very hard to feel like this was worth it. Whereas, like, you know, the alternative before Egypt ever happened was just, like, a normal childhood in America, which I was like, that wouldn't be that bad. And just having to go church to church, like, literally every day, city to city, was just very exhausting on a kid who just wants to have a normal childhood and have his own summer. Although the churches were also very welcoming and nice, and they paid for us to, you know, have, like, nice activities. Like, one time they had us go to, like, a theme park or whatever. They didn't even force themselves to come along. They're like, your family deserves a break, go do that. So I'm not going to say, like, the churches didn't do anything for us as well, but still, it's super hard to, like, look at that time in my life and be like, oh man, this was also worth it. Yeah, it was just a lot. It was very overwhelming, is basically all I have to say.
It's interesting because coming from, like, a person from me who's never, like, been out of out of the country before, and when you were first talking about how much you travel throughout the summer was my first interact, or like the first thought was like you're like really rich or whatever. But then like I never like as you like started to actually talk about it, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But like
my parents just got a good job opportunity, and they are good. They are genuine people, like people persons.
Yeah.
And so they got along with a lot of rich people as well as just churches with a lot of money, and that were just willing to donate to this random family that decided to go to Egypt.
I mean, and then it's kind of interesting as well to see like how you adapted to it, and it's like that's kind of like your quote unquote new normal, traveling all around the world and stuff.
Yeah, it's something that like it's almost unsettling to be in the same place for a long period of time without, you know, being able to have like an experience elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like I'm always ready for a dynamic change in my setting or environment. And when something is not like that, then like I get very antsy or feel like I'm trapped almost. It's not the most fun feeling. But I've gotten used to it better as I've lived in Philadelphia for a good amount of time now.
I guess it's a blessing and a curse. How many countries have you been to, if you can remember?
Okay. America, Canada, Egypt, Lebanon, Oman. Basically, so far I've counted North America, Africa, and the Middle East. Have I been anywhere else in the Middle East? Is it really just those two? I guess like my siblings have been to more, but that's it for me there. Ireland, England. I don't know if you count Scotland as a separate or like with Great Britain or whatever, but yeah, there too. North Ireland, that's a different country.
Oh, really? I never knew that.
Hungary, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Spain, so that's 13. Italy, Greece, that's 15. There's more than this, hold on. Okay, I'm around 15. I can't imagine there being more than like 2 others. Oh, I've been to France, that's 16. But I haven't been to Paris. I've just been briefly into France. There's got to be another. Switzerland, that's 17. I feel like that's about it. So give or take like 1 or 2.
Yeah, and that's a crazy amount of countries. Out of all of those countries, which one was your favorite to visit?
Ooh, that's hard, man. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 answers, actually, because I have a city and then a country in general. Like, the whole country is just, like, so good. But this particular city outside of that country, Barcelona, Spain, is amazing. Every time I've gone, actually, it's just been 2 times, but every time I've gone has been so fucking fun. One time I just went with my family, and another time I just went with my friends, and both times were just so great. Went both time in the summer, though, so, like, I don't know how great it is during the winter, but when it's very lively, non-COVID times during the summer, it's fucking popping. It's so nice. And like the things to see, like there are certain cities where like the things to see, like the touristy things are all like very centered in this one area. And if you ever leave that area, it's like, oh, this shit's garbage. Barcelona is not like that. It's very wide and expansive and like all the cool shit you can go see. And if you're really into walking type cities, it's definitely one of them. If you're really into beaches, like right next to the city, that's definitely a place where you could go. Good food, nice people-ish. Anyways, I don't know why I thought you wanted to log out randomly.
That's weird. I guess it's still recording?
Yeah, it's still recording. Yeah, so Barcelona is my favorite city to have visited. But Germany... Shit, actually, I don't even know if this is true. My old answer used to be Germany because that was one of the countries I went to the most as a kid. But now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's actually Italy. Germany is very consistent. Like all their cities are nice. It's obviously a very developed country, and their urban and rural environments are all very just nice and cleanly. Like it's just relaxing almost. I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like a very nice feeling country. But Italy, I would say, is probably my favorite to visit. I've also later on visited that a couple of times. Rome and then some of the northern cities in Italy. I just feel like that's it's very diverse type of country. Like the urban environment can be everything you want an urban environment to be, but then the rural environment is also everything you want that to be. And like whereas Germany is very consistent in its kind of like niceness, like Italy just like takes that to a whole new level. Whereas it's like it's obviously very nice in some areas, but then it's just fucking awesome in a lot of areas. And like I can't say the same for Germany. Like Berlin there's some areas there was like, oh yeah, this is awesome, but like most of the time it's just like, oh, this is consistent, like I enjoy being here, like this is just a nice feeling. But in Italy it's just like I'm always in awe of like the things to do, things to see, and just like the environments. Obviously the food is way better than in Germany, I would say. I think that people are just so fun there. Like in Germany they're pretty fun, but in Italy I don't know why, but I just have like this love for the Italian people. I don't know, I just feel like I really vibe more with the culture there too, because it reminds me a lot of Egypt, just because it's on the Mediterranean, and that's why. Yeah, I think it's just a cultural factor. Like Germany, for all other reasons, is just as great, but the cultural factor, I have to give it to Italy, and that just pushes it over.
That's awesome.
So,
What area of Italy did you visit?
So Rome was the first time I ever went to Italy, but then after that we went to basically all the big cities in like northern Italy, which is like Venice and Milan, and we stayed in a very small town. I wish I could remember the name, because if you ever like looked up the images there, it's fucking beautiful. It's like the city that's kind of hidden behind a mountainside, so you would never guess it's there. And beyond that mountainside, where the city's like pinned in this corner of it, then there's a bunch of like, I don't even know what you call it. It's like a lake, I guess, or maybe like a really wide river. And so, I don't know, some of the most beautiful pictures I've ever gotten are from there. Just to be able to, like, kind of live there for a bit, I mean, it was just such a cool experience. Like, if I could live there for the rest of my life, I would. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's just like, oh my God, it's breathtaking. The actual, like, culture of that town is really cool, too, so.
Yeah, Italy's my, like, dream country to visit, because my dad's side of the family is from Italy. I think actually from Sicily, and just from since then, it's just like I've really want to visit there because of all the beautiful sights, like you said, and everything. And did you know that you can buy houses for $1?
They're really cheap there. I have many friends actually that have places in Italy, but I have an American friend in particular. When he was moving away from Egypt, and they weren't going to live internationally ever again, but right before they moved out of Egypt, they bought a house on top of a hill in Italy. Yeah. And it was basically nothing, but they're like, this is going to be like our vacation house.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I remember seeing that picture and being like, holy shit. It reminded me of, even though this is not at all like the region, but Emperor's New Groove, you know, that little house on the hill that one family has? Have you guys ever seen Emperor's New Groove?
I've never seen that show.
Oh my God. One of the characters is like, who has his family, like they have a small little cottage on top of this hill that they always have to run down every time they want to go anywhere. Like that's almost what it reminded me of, but that's in like Peru or something. So
that's so funny. Well, I mean, like it costs $1 to like actually buy the house and property, but like it costs like $80,000 to renovate or whatever. But still, like $80,000 on a home, that's like crazy.
Not bad.
My dad was actually looking to buy a home in Italy for that reason.
Yeah, I've always wanted to spend, I don't know, just like a summer there. Like that's definitely like a place where I want to have like a getaway spot, you know?
Full vacation?
You know how celebrities have like their getaway spots in like rural areas of like fucking Montana or something? Yeah. Like they just need to fucking invest in Italy, dude. Because like there are some rural areas of Italy that are 50 times nicer than fucking rural areas of Montana.
That is true.
And for probably just around the same price as well. So.
But do we really trust Hollywood people to move there? I feel like they would ruin it.
That's true. I don't want them to ruin Italy.
Yeah. Let's keep it on the ground just for us. Yeah. We will own the entire country. What is it like living in Alabama comparatively to Michigan and then to PA?
Alabama, this is hard because I can't say too much about Michigan because I never really lived there. The only time I kind of lived there was during COVID, where I was not out and about and I couldn't really like immerse myself in this new environment. I was just like indoors, so kind of hard to say, but I've stayed there long enough where I can get a good like vibe of the culture there. Michigan is one of the most beautiful states in America, and I stand by that because of its lakes and its amount of green, and even during the winter it's beautiful, and neighborhoods are usually really nice. I mean, everyone shits on Detroit, but I think Detroit's even, you know, kind of cool, but no one likes Detroit for some reason. I think Michigan's just like is a very ideal place for a lot of people to live. It's basically got anything you'd ever want as kind of like a, if you're into that kind of, I don't know, suburban type of lifestyle, especially like Michigan's where it's at, especially if you can get a house by next to one of the lakes. That's also a big thing too. Other than that, Alabama is weird. And, it's just so weird. I don't even know how to explain it. The South is wild. It's like, oh man, how do I even explain the South to someone? It's like one of the most welcoming places on earth. As I said before, right? I was telling you that, like, I swear this piece could go over there, but anyways, Alabama is one of the most, I mean, the South in general is one of the most welcoming areas on earth, but it can easily set you off, like, in a way that, like, no other place on the earth can. Like, it can make you go wild in the way is, like, you just, like, aren't comfortable, you know? And it's just, like, it's such a hit or miss area. It's like if you're from there, like, you get it. And even though I disagree with like a lot of the Southern customs or like, you know, the culture down there, it's just like, you know, I get it because like I'm from there. But if you're not, you're just not going to feel comfortable around there. It can be very beautiful too, the forests and the wildlife and all that. But there's also some very gross, ugly areas in the South, like in Mississippi or in, I don't even know. It's hard to describe if you haven't been there as well. But food's great. Very rowdy sports fans, obviously. A lot of pride and I guess I would say entitlement down there too. And obviously when it comes to like Christian politeness, that's a big thing down there as well. So yeah, I guess. Man, it's so hard to explain, but yeah. And then Pennsylvania, from what I gather, actually this is more Philadelphia. I feel like Philadelphia is kind of different than the rest of Pennsylvania, so I'm not going to speak for all of Pennsylvania because I haven't really been out a lot of Pennsylvania, but Philadelphia I look to as the younger brother of New York City. In the way that obviously Philadelphia and New York City are very alike because they're big cities in the East, and so they're like from the same family. Yeah. But when you're younger brothers with someone or just brothers with someone, you try to be basically as different as possible from the older brother. It's like, oh, I see, like when you look to your older brother, it's like, oh, I see you're always busy. I'm going to be as relaxed as I can. That's kind of how I look at it as Philadelphia, is like, there's such a hustle and bustle about New York City that's the complete opposite in Philadelphia. Everyone's just always kind of relaxed and like willing to spark up a conversation. Like there's this aggressive friendliness though. Like if you are from the South, you would not understand this because the friendliness and welcomingness is very polite down there. But if you come up here, like they will say fuck you to your face, and that's supposed to be taken lightly. You know what I mean? That's just kind of how it is. And like obviously I've gotten used to that. And I've always been kind of used to that. That's just always kind of like how I personally have developed my personality to be. So I felt like I chose the right city to go to. There's just like, I don't know, it's the city of brotherly love. Like there's just kind of this brotherhood that's kind of, I mean, obviously they've made a whole motto out of it, but it's unspoken. You'd have to do something really wrong to get on someone's bad side around here. Like it's very easy to just like be friendly with people around here, and people are always just down for a good time. So I never realized the like fuck you as like a polite way, or like I just never like put two and two together because that's like comes secondhand. But that's kind of interesting to view from that aspect. I guess let's dive into some good old sport talk. Yeah, sport talk to end this shit. How did you become a Colts fan? Colts fan was established in me when I was born, basically. I was born into it because my dad raised me on it. I didn't have any other choice, essentially. But also because in Alabama it's very split. because you could cheer for the Saints, you could cheer for the Falcons, and since we're in North Alabama, you could even cheer for the Tennessee Titans. I think a majority of the people around there cheered for the Tennessee Titans. My dad made sure that did not happen because Tennessee Titans are the rivals of the Indianapolis Colts. And so yeah, he really tried to instill from a young age of like, yo, Peyton Manning, and I was like, yeah. So that's, I mean, it's really that simple. Just like, he made sure that was the way.
Going back to Egypt a little bit, but how did sports affect your life within Egypt?
I think the culture of sports there threw me off sports for a long time because I was really into soccer, and I was very used to it being kind of one of the more underground sports in America. Like, no one really cared about it. There wasn't that much of a passion for it. And then when I came to Egypt, I was so overwhelmed by the passion they had for it that I just completely dropped it. I was just like, I can't keep up with this, man. People love this sport so much. I don't even know that much, man. I probably could have gotten really good at it if I just stuck it out, but I just got scared, I guess. And so, yeah. And it's also really cool because, like, that's basically the only sport they care about in Egypt. So in America, like, people will always be split. Like, oh, I'm a basketball guy, I don't really watch baseball. And someone else is like, oh, I'm really into baseball, blah, blah, blah. In Egypt, it's just soccer. Yeah. Or I should say football. It's just football. If you're going around anywhere in Egypt, you can always spark up a conversation about football with someone. Whether that be Al Ahly, like one of the club teams in Egypt, or the national team of Egypt, which there's a lot of pride about because they've been really good with Mo Salah. And then because of Mo Salah, people have really gone into Premier League, where he plays with Liverpool. And that guy's a hero. Like, they genuinely, and it wasn't even a joke. Like, people would joke about this in America, like, oh, Tom Brady for president or something like that. They genuinely wanted this guy as president.
Damn, that's crazy.
I mean, he's a really genuine and nice guy, so I don't blame him. He gives back to his community because he's not, like, from one of the bigger cities like Cairo or Alexandria. He's actually from, like, a very rural type of environment in Egypt, and so he knows what it's like to come up from the rough. Yeah, he didn't come from much. There's a lot of... He has a lot of pride for Egypt and gives back a lot because he knows, what it's like, and he always has to, represent those roots. Very much appreciated. And, like, anytime anyone Egyptian gets big, like, there's so much pride in Egypt about that. So, like, Rami Malek, when he, like, literally, like, I don't even remember who it was. Like, I think he shook hands with some female actress, and, like, Egypt went wild. Like, oh my god, Rami Malek, one of our own, just touched, like, some big actress. That's fucking so wild. Funny. So yeah, but about sports, like, basically they just live and breathe that shit, and that's all they really care about. But at the same time, they're also very successful in weightlifting and, like, wrestling and the Olympics, which is kind of random, but, like, they're very successful with that. At my own school, though, which is kind of different, they had a very great swimming program to the point where one of the girls actually went on to be in the Olympics from my school. Like, I think when I first joined the school in 6th grade, like, she was a senior or something like that. So that was, like, really cool. Like, oh, wow, this is successful. She actually sets, like, an African record, so...
That's crazy.
I had always been into sports, but I really learned about being passionate about sports from being in Egypt. Like... just a very type of, like, I don't know, blind passion. Like, my team can never do no wrong, even when they're literally ass. You know what I mean? Yeah. So,
how about, like, watching sports throughout Egypt? Was it solely, like, soccer, or were there, like, channels with, like, football, like NFL?
We never had cable, but no, there was not NFL or NBA or anything like that. American football is on the rise in Egypt, but, like, you would have to, like... They only see that through, like, social media or whatever. Because, like, Egypt really loves aggressive sports. So that has been on the rise within, like, community. Like, actually just, like, colleges, I guess, have started to develop programs. Basketball, like, no one really knows about that there. They don't really care. Baseball, definitely not. They don't give a fuck about baseball. Maybe, like, volleyball... No, not even volleyball. I don't even know what else is, but it's just soccer. Like, that's it. I never really watched much on my own, but I would go to people's houses and watch it quite a bit. Because, football is just... There's never an end date. Like, NFL is like, oh, you have the league season, and then you don't watch football for the rest of the year. In, like, Europe or in the Middle East, there's always something going on. Whether that be the World Cup, or the Premier League, or the Champions League, or one of the regional tournaments, CONCACAF. I don't know what the African regional tournament is, but they have like a really long name, so it's hard to remember. But there's always something going on.
How about playing sports?
Playing sports, very aggressive. Obviously, people have a lot of pride there. Yeah, people took sports seriously there for sure, and there's definitely a very teammanship mentality to it. Like, it's a brotherhood. Like, whenever you join any team, people just take a lot of pride, and like people you would never think you would talk to, you'll definitely like get to know very well if you just play a sport with them. Like, it's a very great way to socialize. So like, if you're a kid who's moving internationally and you find out that you're going to Egypt, just fucking do any sport ever and you'll just like make friends. It's really that simple. Probably the same in America, honestly. Like, I would say that's pretty like an international concept, but like I would say especially so in Egypt.
How was did you play any sports when you were in Egypt?
I didn't really. I just like did like pick up like soccer games, or just like randomly I would play basketball with people. Like, I never did any of like the big like, I never joined like a high school team, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. I briefly did rugby in like a community league because my Australian friend convinced me in like 6th grade. But I never went to any of the practices at some point. But then my parents made me do the tournament for it because like they had paid so much for it. And so I was just like, okay, sure. And I actually like scored.
Really?
It was very odd. Like, rugby's a really weird sport. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't ever play it again. Like, it was kind of fun just like to test around with it, but like I don't think it's my vibe. So.
I never knew that you played rugby before.
Yeah. That was a very long time ago, so it's kind of hard to remember. But and yeah, like my school would host like various like tournaments and events where I would join in every now and then. But like, it's very easy to just like start playing soccer, like because my school always had its not like open doors or anything like that. Like, if you're part of the school, like you could always come in at any time, even after school, even on the weekends you could come and do shit there. So even if you just want to hang out on the grass, like they let you, which is like no high school sports, but it was very easy to just like play leisurely and casually with people, which is the only time I ever had like any reason like I had to go to the hospital was because me and my friends decided to play these high schoolers back when we were in middle school. Just some soccer game, and I was goalie and dislocated my thumb. So. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
How was meeting Marshawn Lynch?
Right. So as I was saying, American football is kind of on the rise because it's a very aggressive sport, and Egyptians love that. And so colleges have developed teams and stuff like that. And so there's this program that actually I found out that Kenny Moore of the Colts is part of it now. He wasn't part of it back then, but he is now. It's called Football Without Borders, and basically they go around a lot of countries that have their own community leagues, and they just do training camps with them, with like actual NFL players doing training camps with these community leagues to make it a more international sport, which I think is like an awesome initiative, and anyone who ever has been part of it, like I shout out. So Marshawn Lynch was a part of it this year when they went to Egypt. I was in 10th, maybe 9th grade. I want to say 10th though. He came just to do that camp, obviously, and that camp was supposed to be on a college campus. But, and here's a really big Egyptian cultural insight, is that one of the team members died on that college team. And because of that, like, it's a cultural thing, like, oh, you can't have an event because of that. And so all of a sudden it's just like, well, we're without a venue and we bring all these NFL players. It's like, well, sorry, but you know, this happened, so we can't do it anymore. And so they're just kind of stuck in Egypt. So they're looking around for like any place with a field basically that they can get this done. And I was like, well, actually there's an American school. They have some fields. They're just soccer fields, but regardless, like, you can go and use them. And so all of a sudden, like, day of, we just hear like rumors like, oh my god, these NFL players are coming to campus. And everyone's like, what? Like, since when? Like, and then like we start like searching it up. It's like, oh my god, Marshawn Lynch. Like,
that's so
this
funny.
is a guy that like even back when I was in Alabama, I knew of. Like, I watched his beast mode run live against the Saints. Always looked up to him. Always tried to get him in fantasy as well. That was like my big thing. And so he came, and I just literally watched him play Foursquare with elementary kids and just cursing around them. Like, obviously it was all fun and shit like that, but all these elementary schoolers trying to play against Marshawn Lynch, and he's just like, get this shit out of here and shit like that. Like, it was so funny. You know, he's a very serious guy. A lot of people get the feeling of like he, you know, very prideful and like, I'm only here so we don't get fined, shit like that. But he can be a fun guy, but when someone challenges him, he takes that shit personally. So yeah, this varsity basketball player who wanted to do 1v1 against him, and then he just shot 3 against him the whole time. And it was on this like elementary court too, where you could easily like drive up, but he just kept shooting a long distance, and Marshawn Lynch got so mad. He's like, why don't you drive up on him? And so he finally did. Marshawn steals it and then dunks on him.
That's so funny.
Come on, you think you're going to play college, Adam? Yeah. Not a sport. I'll give you dunk. You got ball. Marshawn, don't believe me. He doesn't play defense.
Oh!
7 feet tall, you want to shoot?
Adam, dunk on him.
Marshawn, I say the same thing to him all the time.
Adam, what was that?
And like Marshawn's a short dude, he couldn't do that on an actual hoop. But it was just an elementary one, and it ended up on like Sports Center and shit like that. And I was right next to the guy who was recording it.
That's crazy.
And so he just started walking away, and I was like, this is my chance. I don't know why young Titus thought like, oh, he seems pretty mad, like, let's go talk to him. So as he's walking away, I kind of like go like a long route, kind of like so I don't come up on him from behind, but so I kind of like swerve in. So I do that, and like he doesn't even look at me, he just keeps walking. But I'm like kind of walking with him. I was like, hey, I just want to say that you helped me win my fantasy or something. Like, I was like, what did I say to him? And I just said that. I was like, yeah, good shit, man. And he just kept walking.
That's so funny.
And I was like, yes.
That'll be 100% me if that was my situation.
Later on, I found out that NFL players don't really like hearing about fantasy shit and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, shit. Like,
dang.
Maybe I did the wrong thing there. But
oh well, you're young, you can't blame yourself. How do you think the Colts will do this up and coming season?
They got a young quarterback, which is a big deal. Jonathan Taylor's going into his second year, so run game is going to be extra effective just because Wentz is more mobile as well. So like even when they don't run Taylor, like Nyheim Hines, he's a great receiving back. Like Wentz will be able to get the ball to him if like a passing play goes wrong or something like that. Like they're going to be great, and like when they have to improvise, like obviously Frank Reich's plays are usually very successful, but in any chance that shit goes wrong, Wentz is going to be able to improvise better than Philip Rivers because he's simply more mobile, and because he has more experienced backs now. Like Jonathan Taylor, he wasn't as experienced anymore. That's a big deal. Our defense is always going to be very good, especially if we just need to get more involved in this free agency thing. Colts have never been like a part of the initial hype of it, but they get some of the more like discount players towards the end of free agency. So it'll be interesting to see who they end up picking up. Hopefully they get like a really good wide receiver, because it seems like none of the big wide receivers have been taken yet. Like Kenny Galladay is still on the board, Juju Smith-Schuster. Who else? Who's that one Texans player?
Will Fuller.
Will Fuller's still on the board. So yeah, there's a lot to go for them there. They also just need a left tackle, some edge rushers. Like if they were able to get a premier edge rusher, that'd been big, but it seems like most of them have been taken. I think there's still some decent left tackles they can get in free agency, but they'll probably draft that. They could address cornerback as well, but we'll see. But I trust the Colts when it comes to like off-season stuff and drafting, so I think we're going to be better than last year, especially since we were a pretty young team relatively. So there's going to be a bit more confidence and experience going into this season.
So you're talking about getting more experience.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our rookies were just having to step up in their roles because of injuries. Like Marlon Mack had an injury, so Jonathan Taylor had to step up. And one of our wide receivers, I can't remember his name, but basically Michael Pittman had to take on a bigger role because of that. We had a rookie kicker as well, rookie defensive backs that were filling in for people who opted out of the season. I mean, there's just like a lot of rookie mistakes are happening throughout the season, despite it being a successful season, throughout the season, and then it just like all culminated in the playoffs. Like everyone was just kind of fucking up. Like the play designs were great, but the execution was not there. It'll be different. It'll be a different story this year.
What are your thoughts on the current Indiana Pacers season?
Indiana Pacers. I love the Indiana Pacers, but injuries fucked us up again. Karis LeVert is back, which is big for us, but it's a bit too little too late, I think. Like having to do that trade kind of made it seem like we were giving up on the potential of the season, because to not have like 20, like two different players, two different starters who could easily get 20 points per game each, like we're out.
Yeah.
So think about that. Our average points per game are basically down 40, and we have these bench players to fill that in. So, you know, we're not going to be as high scoring, and we've never been great from long distance shooting either. And I don't know if that's play design or we're just like, we don't have enough great shooters in general. Defensively, we're great, I believe. You know, in the paint, we got Sabonis, Turner, and a lot of other guys who can really do well there. And we've got some bench stars as well in McConnell. Justin Holiday's been pulling his weight for sure. So I would just say, like, don't count us out to make a very late run at the playoffs just because the East is so bad. And if we could ever get TJ Warren back, that would make such a difference as well. As of right now, it's not looking too great. I just feel like it's kind of getting too late in the season for us to like really get ourselves over 0.500, because I think we're like 4 losses under that right now. I mean, we've always just been a team with a lot of potential, but we just, because of injuries and like other shit, we just could never get it realized.
4 under 500 will still make the playoffs in the East. That's how
Maybe.
Possibly.
We'll see.
How long have you been watching?
I've always tried to keep up, but I couldn't really watch in Egypt, and there was never really a point to. Indiana Pacers is one of the most unsuccessful franchises in the league. They've always just been good but never great.
Yeah.
And that was the case with Paul George, and that was the case with Prime Oladipo, and that's probably going to be the case now, unless our new coach gets, you know, everyone back on track. But we'll see.
Favorite Pacer as of now?
Like actively playing?
Yeah.
I'm always been a big fan of Justin Holiday, simply because I love his style and his attitude, and he's a NBA champion with the Warriors, by the way. So, he has some championship experience under his belt. But also, I really like Miles Turner. I feel like people give him too much shit, but like he's one of the greatest defensive players in the entire league. So put some respect on his name. And then Sabonis, obviously, because he's like our all-star. And now I'm really getting into liking Karis LeVert. I really liked him with the Nets when he was with the Nets, and now I'm like pretty excited he's on our team. So.
What is your most favorite NBA player of all time?
All time?
And then currently.
Of all time, probably Reggie Miller, just because he's like, when you think about the Pacers, like he's the greatest. Love that guy. Michael Jordan's also definitely up there, and LeBron James for sure. Kobe Bryant too. I would give an honorable mention to him. But other than those guys, like one of my favorite players right now is Jon Marant. I don't know.
Where is he from? I don't know that name.
Jon Marant?
Yeah.
He's the reigning rookie of the year with the Memphis Grizzlies.
Oh, okay.
I just love his swagger, his attitude, everything about that guy is just... He's awesome. And I think he's going to lead his team to championships. He's just like... He's just so good. I don't know what to tell you, man. He's one of my favorite like young players, but of the older guys, I really like Giannis. I think he's dope. I always try to cheer for like Damian Lillard and like Paul George as well. Paul George just because he was with the Pacers at one point, but I mean that didn't have like an ugly. I mean that had an ugly kind of falling out, but Damian Lillard of course is also up there.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's all my questions.
Woo!
Thank you for coming on the podcast and talking with me on this episode. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Woo!